Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 303rd New Social Environment. I'm Cal McKeever, Curatorial Assistant here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and the privilege of being your MC today for a tribute to the great John Giorno, with Penny Arcade, Kyle Dacuyan, Christian Haye, Colin Dickerman, Chris Martin, and Bob Holman, hosted by the Rail's publisher and artistic director, Phong H. Bui. We start all of our events with two important acknowledgements. The first is that here in Brooklyn, we are on the unceded land of Lenape-Hoking, which still belongs to the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. The second acknowledgement is that Black Lives Matter. We recognize the legacy of settler colonialism as part of the many contemporary expressions of white supremacy. We honor those who have lost their lives to this violence. I encourage you all to check the chat for a living document of resources and actions as we do our part in the learning and unlearning required to undo this legacy of injustice. And now to introduce today's esteemed guests. In the interest of time, I'll share the participants' full bios in the chat during the event. Penny Arcade is an internationally respected performance artist, writer, poet, and experimental theater maker. Kyle Dacuyan is a poet, performer, and translator who writes poems and makes performance, and is the executive director of the Poetry Project at St. Mark's. Chris Martin is a contemporary abstract painter who lives and works in Brooklyn. Christian Haye is a writer, poet, and critic who lives in New York. Bob Holman is a poet and poetry activist, most closely identified with the oral tradition, spoken word, and slam poetry. Colin Dickerman is an editor and publisher who, while at FSG, published Giorno's wonderful memoir, Great Demon Kings. And our host, Phong H. Bui, is an artist, writer, and independent curator, publisher, and artistic director of the Brooklyn Rail, the River Rail, Rail Editions, and Rail Curatorial Projects. Phong, take it away.
Super duper. Thank you, Kyle. Hola, everyone. We are so thrilled today. I'm privileged to host today NSE as another of, shall we say, our perpetual tribute to our dear friend John Giorno, our great poet, artist, mentor, classic bohemian, social activist, I don't know, nonconformist par excellence, and endless other attribution that I can add, we all can add. I don't know how to describe John anymore at this point, but I want to say there's a few words. I first learned about John at my first poetry class in college with the late Stephen Berg, my professor at Philadelphia College of Art, who was the legendary editor of American Poetry Review. Even in 1980, barely speaking English as my family just landed as boat people from Vietnam in Ben Salem, a poorer township in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, where there's nothing except for beer and white people. Anyway, I dreamt of the cultural life of downtown New York City, beat poetry, performances at Justin Church, music at CB&GB, East Village, West Village, Poetry Project, all the wonderful...
Hi, the person you're about to speak with.
Hello, from different background. That was very interesting. Anyway, my point is that it was that dreaming of being here so badly among the autistic bohemians, you know, different ethnic background from gender, gays, lesbian, immigrant workers, and whoever else that couldn't fit or didn't fit or wanted to be assimilated into the mainstream culture. I don't know. That's where I want to be. I want to be in New York. So you can imagine, you know, here we are here with our friends who create that culture. The remarkable example here, featuring Penny Arcade, Kyle, Colin. Well, Colin is more like part of the mainstream culture who have sympathy for the counterculture. But Christian Haye's here, Bob Holman's here, Chris Martin's here. Michael Stipe couldn't be here with us due to a small medical setback, so we sent him a speedy recovery. I hope that we'll see Michael soon. But okay, so I want to say this. I've been to John's several reading at the Poetry Project and elsewhere, but for the first time meeting him was at the reading that he did with Diane de Prima, right after the Rubin Museum was launched in 1998. So it was so great. We talk about how he was so fiercely opposed to the war in Vietnam, which were one of the reasons that led to the birth of Dial, a poem, which we'll discuss a bit later for sure. But to move forward in time, as many of you know, that the Rail published the special edition as the catalog for the immersive exhibition as a kind of monumental testament of love, all in capital letters from John's husband, our beloved friend Ugo Rondinone. We all love the title. Simply, it just say Ugo Rondinone, I love John Giorno. So this monumental exhibition was shown in, Charlie just confirmed, it's 12 nonprofit venues around Manhattan. I don't know how many, partnering institution also, but it featured all aspects of John's creative life, from painting, films, sound installation, drawings, performances, to amazing material from his own detailed archives, super detailed archives, which he kept with impeccable care. And of course, video installation by both John himself, I remember, as well as other people whom he had worked with or whom he has inspired. So that show, in a way, for me, if I may say so, it reanimates a legacy of experimentation that is as bound to formal innovation, I would say, as it is to social justice and community building through projects that united constellation of artists across discipline. It's very much what inspired the Rail. John was an inspiration for all of us at the Rail. Indeed, I should also mention that John's last reading was as the Rail Collateral Project in the last Venice Biennale. He loved the new slogan of our curatorial project: artists need to create on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy, which I can't wait to share with you at the tail end of our gathering. For now, I would like to do is the following. I thought first, I would love to ask a few questions to each of our friends here about the various dimensions of John, the beautiful fox, not the regal hedgehog. Then I would invite our friend to read a few of their selected poems. And then maybe we can show quickly the slideshow of number of beautiful images of John in various contexts for your viewing pleasure. And then we'll open up to the Q&A. So why don't I just go right away? Let's begin with Penny. How did you first meet John?
Well, I first met John, I think it was 1969. Patti Smith took me to the poetry project, and John was reading, or performing rather, and also Anne Waldman. So I had, my concept of poetry, and I'm coming from a working class immigrant, Southern Italian background. I had just gotten out of reform school with Catholic nuns and had been homeless for a year on the streets of New York, and then got into the Playhouse The Ridiculous. And then in 1969, we did this play with Jackie Curtis, and Patty was in it, and Patty and I became friends, and she wanted to take me to the poetry project. And I saw John Giorno, and I flipped out. So now I had already been performing for a couple of years in the Playhouse, which was rock and roll, improvisational performance, but I could not believe what John Giorno was doing. So, I was introduced to him at that point, but as I tell everybody, I didn't say more than hello to John Giorno till I was 42 years old. I just was too embarrassed, like, who was I to talk to John Giorno? Of course, that's a very different kind of worldview than the one that exists now. But in 1992, when I was 42 years old, I was asked to do a benefit for John Giorno's just went out of my head. Quick, someone know the name of it? You know, his AIDS treatment network. Okay. And I did a performance of a character that I had made based on a homeless, Black Latina homeless woman that I had observed in South Street Seaport. And I had asked her if I could do her, and she said yes. And I performed this performance at John's benefit. And when I got done, John Giorno, unbeknownst to me, suddenly somebody was picking me up in their arms. And it was John Giorno, picked me up in his arms and crushed me to his chest and told me that he loved me and carried me off the stage. And that started my real friendship with John when I was 42. And it continued till his death.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Amazing. What about you, Bob?
Well, I love Penny's origin story. There's so much. I first saw John at some performance. I think it was at the Museum of Modern Art, because he was very connected. I'd say that Lita Hornick was like a, what do you call that word that starts with a P? Somebody who gives money.
Patron.
Patrons.
Lita Hornick, patron of the arts, and John were very good friends, and his Culture, Kulchur publications were coming through Lita. And annually, Lita would throw the party to end all parties after the reading at the Museum of Modern Art. And Eddie Jefferson played there one time. I mean, and there was enough food to feed the poets for a week, which was gone in an hour, but John's performance, he had on his headsets and his loop station, and this was back before there were such a thing as headsets and loop stations. And while I thought I knew all the traditions leading into the poetry project, the various New York and Beat schools and the Umbra poets, the Deep Image poets and the Black Mountain poets. Mm-hmm. I didn't know this poet. And when I looked him up in the anthology that Ron Padgett and David Shapiro had edited, I read Giorno's biography and didn't realize that he had lifted Elvis Presley's biography and put it in there as his own. Later on, John and I would become, very close. The performance mode, the orality that he carried with him into the highest realms of the avant-garde, including the steeple at St. Mark's Church, which is where he broadcast his dialogue poems. The people couldn't find where John was because he was ensconced up those stairs there, probably right above where you're sitting now, Kyle. No, I see you're at home right now, but you know what I'm talking about, behind that clock that never works. Right up there was John. So right now I've been seeing him a bunch because getting ready to release a film about Ginsberg called Ginsberg's Karma, about him in India, and John is in it with a marvelous interview about what happens to the body in the burning Ghat. So even up until yesterday, I was saying hello to John, and my first piece of John paraphernalia is the I Love John Giorno personal lube.
Thanks, Bob. Kyle, what about you?
I only had contact with John just shortly before his death. I had invited him to read in the first New Year's Day marathon that I was organizing at the Poetry Project. And he actually told me, I love this event. This event is important to me. but I no longer have my legendary and remarkable breath. And so I'm done with that part of my life now.
Mhm.
So we had just a little bit of a correspondence. That was that was before 2019. He died in October of 2019.
Mhm.
But he's probably one of the most, if not the most represented artist in our audio archive. We have dozens of hours of John performing at St. Mark's. As Bob mentioned, he broadcast Dial a Poem from the Bell Tower. He pretty infamously in April 1969 delivered a kind of poetry sermon from the balcony of St. Mark's. All of the attendees were in the sanctuary and had partaken in a bowl of acid-laced punch.
Mhm.
We had a number of bail fundraiser benefits for John in the late 60s, early 70s. And he's also, you know, he's a pioneer of bringing and distributing poetry in new ways. I think these gatherings are part of John's ongoing vision to bring poetry into the world through all kinds of pleasure-focused gathering. You know, he put poetry on. He made object making a kind of publication practice for poetry. Bob showed the personal lubricant. He put poetry on matchbooks. He made poetry vinyl albums. Dial a Poem, I think, is a visionary like circulation practice for poetry. And that imprint continues to really model everything that we do at the project as well.
It's super true, Kyle. That was created in 1968, the height of Vietnam War, which we will touch upon in a minute. Let's see, where are you, Christian? How and when did you first meet John? You like to be unmute? I think
Christian, you have to unmute
I am
yourself.
now.
Yeah,
There.
you could. We can hear you. Yeah.
Let me see. I first met John at the Poetry Project, and I want to just say I was kind of in the same space Penny was in terms of, you know, why would what would John Giorno have to talk about with me? And however, I actually never left that space because I'm not very at readings, I just kind of want to go take in what I'm taking in and then not like really chit chat afterwards. So I prefer to talk with writers outside of context of their own performances and their own presentations. So I really didn't have a personal relationship with John. So, but I, you know, through varied people, I, you know, was a hello, handshake, kind of inquisitive, cursory, polite conversation.
I see. That's great. I think, Chris, what about you, Chris? You came to know John a bit of late, in the 90s maybe, or, I mean, I know you came to New York in late 70s, but were you aware of his work already then?
I came to New York in 75, I think, 76, and one of the first readings I experienced at St. Mark's was John, and I was so shocked. It was just an electric thing for me, and this guy was just bouncing up and down with energy, and I don't remember which poem, but it was something about you said you'd suck my cock, you. And I remember just being so shocked and thinking, you know, I'm in New York City now. I'm not in Kansas anymore. This is really, this is the sort of avant-garde that I always dreamed about. So I just loved him right away. I didn't really get to know him other than to say hello until, 2005 or 6 or something. And I was asked by the Journal magazine to go interview him with a photographer. And went to the bunker. I had brought a huge joint of marijuana to give him after the interview as a present. But when I told him that, he just said, great, and he just lit it up. And so we smoked a vast quantity of marijuana, and I was really not, I could hardly focus on the questions. I could hardly see my piece of paper, but John seemed completely sober and together, and he gave a great interview. So I just instantly, I had such a crush on the man. I just sort of fell in love. What an amazing person. And then I got to know him and Ugo together shortly after that. And my wife Tamara and I, we used to see them quite a lot. And he just had a twinkle and an energy to him that was just magnetic. Tamara and I would come home from some late night just feeling energized every time we spent an evening with him. I remember once leaving the bunker with an old friend, a painter, and we were walking out and he said, you know, Chris, I'm not gay, but that guy, I'd sleep with that guy. Anyway, so, and I think that through the show that Ugo did and the last several years, I started to become aware of what a kind of colossus he was and is in terms of what he did to change and open up the poetry world, and also just in the quality of his poems. So on another note, I should just say that, so I was up in the country for most of this last year, and I had some very difficult times. I was by myself, and I remember at one point calling my wife. I was feeling really depressed, and she said, listen, Chris, go get that picture that we have of John Giorno and just bring it out. And so I had him out smiling at me the whole winter. And it really helped. I'm not saying he's a saint or something, but having John's smiling thing, whenever my mind was going through, I could look over and go like, oh, right, yeah, John. So I love the man. I miss him.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. As Kyle said just earlier, you know, I think that we were lucky. We somehow managed to welcome John to our collateral project just a month and a half before he passed away. So he said to everyone that he wouldn't read anymore. That's part of his career had now put to an end. The last chapter will be really making art and spend time with Ugo and close friends. And he wouldn't perform anymore, but he went and performed and read at the Rail collateral project. So it's amazing that he did that, which brings to mind that Ugo said that it took him 25 plus years to work on the memoir. And then he miraculously able to finish it just a week before, you know, before he left us, basically. So my question is to you, Colin. Would you anytime prior have this knowledge or awareness that the memoir was about to be signed with you, with FSG, and that you have been the one that chosen to work with the memoir? Can you share with us how it all came about?
Sure, of course. I had known of John's work a little bit, but I didn't know that much about it. And a mutual friend of ours who was working as his literary agent called me and said, I have this manuscript. I think it was 350,000 words, or I know it was over 1,200 pages. And I want to send it to you. And I was like, oh my God, I can't deal with that. But he sent it, and I found it so mesmerizing, and it really introduced me to all the important things that John had accomplished and was still accomplishing. And it was such a heady mix of poetry and art and sex and Buddhism, and just had the most incredible life force in it. So I called him in for a meeting, and we met at the offices of FSG. And I think, like everybody else here, I just totally fell in love with him from moment one. He had such an incredible spirit and such a insatiable curiosity, and was really just an inspiration. And so I said I would work on it with him, and that began a lot of work. That took about 1.5 years to kind of get it whittled down to the current page count, which was about 1/5 of what it was. And the way that John had written it, because he'd been writing it for so long, for 25 or even longer, 30 years, all the pieces of it were discrete. So there would be like 20 pages about Warhol, and then 40 pages about Jasper Johns. And so what we decided to do was sort of unwind it all and put it together as a more traditional memoir, chronological order. So it was an enormous amount of work, but it was such a pleasure to work with him. And I got to spend a couple of weekends with him. He would come up to spend time at our house in the country to work. And I frustratingly found out that he had a country house about 5 minutes from me for years and years and years, but he had sold it before I knew him. So I was always like, oh, we could have been spending so much more time together, because he was such a pleasure. So yeah, I just marvel at the timing and the fact that we really, we got the jacket, we got everything all buttoned up, and then he unfortunately passed away. But we really had done everything, and it really felt like that book was complete. And just to know that it had been in the making for so long, it was such an honor and a privilege to get to work on it with him.
Yeah, and then here's the book, everyone. So in case you haven't seen it, it's beautifully made. And I was telling my team this morning that I read it last night in 4 hours, because it's such a page turner. And it's just remarkable. Like, I know that most of us are here, good friend, Chris, good friend, Kai's becoming a good friend, Penny I knew forever, and so is Bob. And I think Christian is getting to know now. But the idea is that, how come some of us are super aware of the beginning, of formation from the beginning? How come we have a memory who was important to us, as if whether we take note or not. I mean, some people do, I certainly do, and I know that John does. It just occurred to me that I remember once reading an interview with Sobello, who I managed to meet and have dinner a few times. He was asked, what is a writer? Who is a writer? And he say, it's a person who lives by his imagination, who has appeared suddenly from where he doesn't really know, for how long he doesn't even know either. But although he tends to take the world for granted, and he's not surprised by all of these wonderful, miraculous things that surround him, but he has to pretend not to be surprised, because at heart, he is surprised, astonished, and delighted. And then he says something which stuck with me forever. He say, I think most people become blasé at an early age. At being blasé just means covering up this astonishment at having been born, being here. It's amazing. So I remember that super well, just because I was reading from the very beginning, the first chapter. To John, as a sophomore in high school, I had an English teacher, Miss Glick, who assigned him to write a poem, which led him to his first ever feeling of bliss. He expressed in it and became a poet right then. I love it. He said, follow your heart. Here, I'm reading to you now. Follow your heart, seeing bright feeling in your heart mind. Believe in it and continuing with great diligence. The bright clarity being a reflection of one's true nature. At the moment, I became a poet. It's amazing, because in the following year, he then have another great teacher, which he wrote down very carefully, Deborah Tannenbaum, who sent him to take the train from Long Island to see Dylan Thomas play under Millwood. You remember, Colin?
Yeah.
I mean, for most of us, okay, so everybody here who are poet like Christian and Penny and Bob and Kyle, you know it. There are, that in that moment, we all know how amazing Dylan Thomas' powerful, hypnotic, one can even say seductive voice, as part of his performative act, you know, that have such significant influence on John thinking early on. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like I know that he bought 2 albums of Dylan Thomas immediately, and certainly not T.S. Eliot, which is interesting, right, Bob? I mean, whose poetry is profoundly brilliant. But I remember listening to his own reading of his own poetry. You can fall asleep in the first few lines, even The Wasteland, you know? So what do you, so my question is that what do you think this relationship between Thomas and John, and you can begin to think about the subject performance in the broader sense. Can we start with you, Penny?
Yeah, sweat. Remember, Dylan Thomas was sweating, like great drops of water were flying off his brow and fell on John. I mean, it was a visceral, I mean, imagine, you know, the great Jack Smith said, to be in the presence of a genius for an hour is enough. If you're in the presence, I mean, this is the thing that's sad about the end of lineage, because we are living now with the end of lineage. I mean, I'm saying that in response to you, Phong, saying, you know, how some of us held this idea from an early age and continued forward, right? I think that was the real, the impact. I mean, of course, you know, Bob Holman, you know, is responsible for slam poetry, which is directly lineaged back to John Giorno's performance poetry, and Anne Waldman too, for that matter, because Anne also was a performance poet. But so it's all lineage. So for John, it started right there when he was 15 years old.
Yeah, it's true. Bob?
Yeah, not only sweat, but of course he ran into Dylan Thomas literally in the bathroom at interview.
Right.
You know, so you know, there it is, the poet's kiss that passes on the lineage, and you could go on and on into this. The way that Dylan Thomas, great Welsh poet, didn't speak Welsh, but he heard the Welsh. And he translated the Welsh rhythms into English. Okay, so John picks up on that performative aspect and adds into it the electronics. You know, and of course the poetry slam that was actually started by Mark Smith in Chicago before I brought it to the New Eurekan is, you know, has as much to do with the decimistas, the improvisational poets of Puerto Rico and other Spanish speaking areas, as it does to the, so it's the mix of it. And that's what John was all about. You know, you pick up his album. I was lucky to be on Sugar, Alcohol, and Meat. You know, Laurie Anderson, who's a poet, who's not a poet, right? William Burroughs, you know, was sensational the way he was inclusive of the performative, and that was the great gift.
Can I add one thing that's connected? You know, when I first got to really, you know, be a friend of John's, because he was Italian and I'm, you know, immigrant, I asked him, you know, where his family was from, and he didn't know, right? Like many, you know, American Italians, they don't know where they're from. But the thing that's interesting is that in the end, it turned out that he was from like 20 miles away, 20 kilometers away from my village. And that this like magnetic attraction that he and I had was in some ways epigenetic. But the other thing is that there is a long culture among my people of this kind of extemporaneous speaking that especially is done at funerals, where the people would stand up and start saying, "Oh, Giovanni, I remember that day when you came to the house and you brought the figs," you know, this kind of declamatory thing, you know, that John and I talked about, that was part of our ethnicity, part of our long history. So I just wanted to add that in
That is super
what Bob
true.
is saying.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now,
Peg.
also, I'll just say that it didn't make it into the final memoir, but he definitely, there was about 200 pages about his family. So he got really deeply involved and very, very interested in it.
Yeah. Well, also it's funny because Ugo's family is also from Basilicata.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
it's pretty crazy.
It's super true. What about you, Christian? What do you think about that relationship? What do you think about his performative aura? I don't think
Christian, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't want squeaks and stuff coming.
Yeah.
But the process of in thinking about him and his work and where he stood, but especially thinking about his relationship with the great artist men of his time, there was the memoir is fantastic reading. It's just it is the dishiest piece of thing since Hollywood Babylon. And it's like it's purely gay, so that makes it even more delightful. And to just hear somebody just like basically being so bitchy and sassy about Allen Ginsberg's dick is it's revelatory, and in just terms of so for him because he always had this kind of like he's a big working class persona. You just look at him and sexually he just looks like like a guy just off the docks or something. Yet at the same time his kind of interior was the New York demi-monde, the kind of the artistic struggles of the downtown scene and what that meant, and everything about and this is what I was thinking about in terms of the reading for this poem tonight. Everything was extremely performative, and it was kind of like I get a lot of White Man's Burden from both his reading style, from his persona, because he's very much trying to be an work that everyman kind of aspect, and kind of like the kind of like deadpan staccato of a lot of his delivery and so on and so forth. He was positioning himself amongst the Rauschenbergs and then Warhol and so on and so forth. And how does that translate into he's very much a creator, I think, of a lot of art systems and a lot of the pillars and the foundations of both the this city's identity, but also more importantly the professionalism and the way artists see themselves and their work. And so there's a constant like thought process and kind of like almost very kind of I always think of like artists as working like within a coliseum, and their artists are both the gladiators and the lions. And so you kind of like everything, all of his positioning, and in fact even the process of like putting so many contemporaries within his works is also it's just a kind of this Shark Tank of artistry. And so kind of the amount of these are just some of the thoughts I've been having especially this past week while going into the work and seeing the videos and remembering the readings that I saw in attendance. And this kind of this idea of artist as a great man was his burden, it seemed to me.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I mean, no more, no less than Richard Burton trying to emulate Dylan Thomas' way of talking into his acting style.
Exactly. Yep.
Ooh, that'd be tough. Kyle, what about that thought?
I think there's really a craft connection here too that I want to talk about. And I feel like we're overdue for a deeper reading of John's poetry work from a craft perspective. He's a really metrical poet.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't need it. I don't want it. You cheated me out of it. It's like that's an anapest. He's actually this really interesting. He's a poet who's really complicating meter and craft, and I think that there's a connection to poets like Thomas, where we see craft not as a set of poetry rules, but craft as meter as a reflection of heartbeat and passion and sex and outrage and grief. And I think that's when you hear John reading his poems, you're hearing that the rhythmic scoring of them is coming from embodied, emotional experience. It's physically and mechanically the expression of what's kind of psychically bubbling up in him. I think also it's the other thing is that his relationship to craft and performance, I think, is really informed by his Buddhist practice too. I mean, you physically hear the Buddhist practice in his breath control and in the relationship of breath to formally what's in the poem, but also substantively his relationship to void and emptiness and uncertainty and indeterminacy. So I think John's poetry, as so many of us experienced it in his lifetime, was really wrapped up in the embodied performance and in the performance aura. But I think that the poetry will hopefully have some afterlife where we can see that, he actually composed poems on the page. In this, they're like they're just a kind of like interesting living artifact of what he was doing craft-wise.
Yeah, no, I think you have definitely a point there.
I have to say, look, for example, it was form on the page, right? It wasn't the performance on the page, or was it a score?
Yeah.
Anyway, this is selections from The Great Cancer in My Left Ball. That was a culture book, I believe.
And you can't leave out rock and roll and the influence of rock and roll, because John is always like put in, with the beats, and he was very much, a late stage pop poet, and that's what he considered himself. And rock and roll was very important to him, and dissonance was very important to him.
Yes, super true, Penny. Chris, what about, and this is, let's change the subject here, move forward a little bit here. All right, so we know he met Warhol in '63. That's a big year. Met Warhol, began also with Warhol, going to see different experimental film, beginning with Jack Smith,
Right.
Flaming Creature for sure. And then in the following year, that very year, Warhol made his first film, Sleep, was starring John in it. And it's so interesting to me, talking to, not long ago, I remember not long after the Warhol retrospective at MoMA, you guys remember in '89? It was an amazing first retrospective I've ever seen of Warhol, but I remember there was a review by John Updike in the New Republic. Exactly, it was so intense. So the review, you know how when you read a native review, usually it have a title. You know what I mean? It's like Hilton Kramer. You know this, Christian. It's like Kramer review of Gersten at Marlborough in the winter 1970, New York Times.
It was such a desperate attempt to okay, this is it. I'm going to have traditionalism, and I'm going to get rid of all this contemporary crap right here, right now in this review.
No, it's true, but it's exactly. So my point is that that review of Gersten, if you remember, it was titled "A Mandarin Pretending to Be a Stumble Bum," right? So forward to Updike review of Warhol, it say fast art, the sweatless creation of Andy Warhol. You know what I mean? So which essentially declaring Warhol is making art for busy people who could only consume art or be spoon-fed with art that less than a minute, Years later, in the around late 90s, I managed to meet him at the Century Club through the great George Brazilla. So I say to Updike, I remember that review very well. You talk quite eloquently about his silkscreen painting and whatnot. But have you ever seen his film? He said, no. Well, his film are super slow. The opposite of it. So basically what I'm saying, you know, you fail to recognize the subversive power of Warhol's work, you know? And my point is that let's talk about that relationship. Why don't we start with you, Chris? John and Warhol. What does that meant for John, that moment, and what it meant for him to absorb everything possible during that period, 63 until 68. I mean, that's a big, many years combined, but still, that's leading to the invention of Dial, a poem.
Well, I'm no art historian, Phong, so I guess one of the things that I'm really aware of now, much more than when I first came to New York, was the incredible courage of Warhol and John Giorno and many others to be honest and celebratory about homosexuality. And this was a really shocking thing. I mean, I remember that first poetry reading. Here's a guy declaiming about sucking cock. And for me, that was just so fabulous and profound. And so the courage that Warhol showed to not hide himself. Mm-hmm. And so I think that whole, I mean, a lot of it obviously was in code with Johns and Rauschenberg and that whole world, but Warhol was fearless in that way. And so I think that's one part of it. And then the other part, I think, is that Warhol is one of the early artists, along with Rauschenberg, to really explore technology. And if something's out there, if there's a new camera, he's going, hey, wow, what does this do? So that openness to what is happening in the culture in general, and then to whatever new gadgets or cameras or whatever around, I think that had a real liberating approach, a liberating effect on John.
It's super true. Colin, do you agree with that immersive community that fed him? Because he often felt like the artist, you know, visual artist, sculpture or painter or dancer or filmmaker, seemed to be a little bit ahead in terms of creating works, you know, because they don't censor their excitement so much.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I am not an art historian at all. I would say with Warhol, I think John, you know, the way that Warhol celebrated everyday objects, and I feel like, and sort of found objects, I think John, you know, when he was recording subways and doing those recordings, that he felt like he was doing something similar with poetry and kind of breaking the bounds of what a poem is, the same way Warhol was breaking the bounds of what a piece of art is. So I know that we talked a lot about him feeling a sort of kinship there. And I think I would argue, I think Warhol did start out very sort of celebratory about his own sexuality, but I think he also took a step back when it became clear that that was not going to be a lucrative career move. And I think John obviously did not do that. And I think it's interesting to think about that with Warhol, the way he started, and then the way that he sort of decided to kind of not promote that, and then also to think about Rauschenberg, who, you know, everyone knew, but no one could really talk about it. So I think John had a very unique view of those men, and also occupied a very unique and extremely brave position, because he never was one to worry about, well, if everyone knows I'm gay, I'm not going to make any money. He was always proud and fierce about that.
Super true. Penny?
Well, there's so much to say about this. I mean, first of all, John was not working class. You know, he hadn't been working class for generations. You know, his family migrated from Italy because they didn't like the idea of Garibaldi. They wanted a king, and they wanted a communion host, you know. I think that as what we know of what was going on in New York from 1950 to 1967, 17 years of extreme experimentation,
Mhm.
You know, this wasn't just that Andy was experimental.
Right.
Andy was influenced by, you know, hundreds of other people whose names will never be known.
Yes.
And I think that John, you know, I mean, the thing that, you know, one of the first things I knew about John before I saw him perform was when he wrote I can't remember, it was a Levine with
That's
that
right.
that gossip, he wrote the gossip column where he like said the sizes of the penises of all of the painters that he had slept with. And, you know, I was a little kid. I was like 17 or 18 years old. The trauma in downtown New York that was caused by John doing that. So John had a certain privilege, you know, he had financial privilege, and he always talked about it. He wasn't somebody who was hiding the fact that, you know, in this kind of thing that people are, oh, how can you afford to do poetry? Oh, guess what? I have a job doing poetry, Kyle. No, all respect. You know, the thing with John was that he had this immense curiosity and this dynamic, the dynamic intelligence, but he also suffered deeply always from tremendous anxiety, profound, desperate depression. And this does, you know, this created something within him, you know.
Yes.
I don't know, I think that's all I'm going to say for right now.
No, but that's definitely true. It's revealed in the memoir, which what ultimately led him to Tibetan Buddhism.
Right.
That's what was the compelling turn of his life for sure. But yeah, I just wanted to lay in the groundwork of that 17 years of that 2 decades, you know, late 50 all the way through the outbreak, the height of the Vietnam War. I mean, Dio, the poem, that's radical. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that briefly for a minute, because 68 was a big year. We know that. We know 68 is when both Dr. King and Robert Kennedy was assassinated, that turned the whole country into terrible social and political unrest. The war in Vietnam escalated, exactly. It was terrible. And here we came, John with his invention of dial or poem. So let's start with you, Bob. You remember that point at all? You must have been what age?
Yeah, exactly. I do remember. I do remember that. And the idea, you know, this was when, you know, there were no robocalls and there was just the beginnings of answering machines. So the idea that you could pick up a phone, dial a number and get a poem, like that's really turns the whole consumerism upside down, right? And John was very assiduous in switching up the poems on there so that, you know, you never knew who you were going to get.
Right.
And it started off as like a little secret society, and then it just grew and grew. And it's eventually it would become a thing. That is to say, there were the dial of poem poets then, you know, and they at the Pompidou, when they did some they had an exhibition of the dial of poem poets, and you could pick up the phone. It was a historic, and again, another means of transmission. There's a telephone. Let's put a poem on it. And you know, so that was, you know, it was again just another. He called his operations the Giorno poetry system. You know, it sounds like it's something straight out of MIT, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
But everything reached the end. And of course, then we're also moving up towards AIDS now, because when AIDS came in, then all of this work, the systems, all came together in an activist purpose to work to help allay the AIDS epidemic, the trauma, the deaths, the illness, to get money to people.
Right.
And
Correct.
he just transferred from one medium to another, and it was all the poem.
Yes, Kyle.
I love the Dial-A-Poem project, and I love that when you call Dial-A-Poem, which you can still call, it's still around. You might hear Allen Ginsberg or Ted Berrigan, but you also might hear like Diamanda Galas screaming and singing into the phone. Kathleen Cleaver, Black Panther activist Kathleen Cleaver. I remember when I got the news that John died, I had been in the middle of really deeply reading John Cage. And when I got the news that he died, I dialed Dial-A-Poem and the recording was John Cage. And so I love, I feel like he's planted these sort of psychic seeds for the work to continue to live. We were talking a little bit about Giorno and Warhol, and I think that there is a relationship materially at this kind of collagist level. Like both of those artists are interested in working with different kinds of found materials, but I actually think that Giorno and Warhol have almost opposite relationships to value. Like Warhol was kind of there was almost something kind of like acquisitive and capital making about Warhol's work, turning things that appeared valueless into these kind of like hyper valuable art objects. John, on the other hand, I think is all about dispossession. It's all about giving the work away and making it more and more widely available. It's I think I think that's part of what he's left to poetry, is that he's tossed these poetry seeds into the wind and they're kind of blowing around and growing up different kinds of wilderness.
Oh, beautiful.
Colin, you want to follow what Kai said there? Because you already have a disagreement with Chris Martin earlier.
It wasn't a disagreement. It was a continuation.
No.
No, I think that's right. I think when I was talking about the Warhol thing, I think it was about the kind of collage, the material thing. I think you're absolutely right about the value piece of it. And so yeah, I completely agree.
Okay, so if on the subject of collage, putting things together disjunctively from here and there, now it seems natural to bring up his relationship with Burroughs for sure and Geisen. So I think that seemed to be natural, and pictorially speaking, poetically speaking, language speaking, rhythm, whatnot. Can you describe what that meant when you first learned about it, Bob? Their collaboration, their friendship.
Well, what can you say about the bunker and Burroughs? The bunker was Burroughs' home base here in New York, and the typewriter that still sits in his room there is where he picked out Naked Lunch was written a lot in Tangier, but some there, and the Wild Boys, so many of the books were written right there in the bunker. This is Giorno. You walk into the Buddhist shrine, you walk into the Burroughs shrine. It's all an old YMCA, of course, with a swimming pool still in it. Explain this to me. Across the street from the new museum now, where Ugo and John used to look out the window and see Ugo's rainbow.
Oh, yeah.
What did it say, Phong? I can't remember right now. Somebody knows, kick ass or something it was. Yes. Anyway, the first public art on the side of and of course, also across the street from the Bowery Mission, the oldest shelter in the city that still extends. So to get back to Geisen and Burroughs, well, it was this land of cut up and experiment where you think of the beats as this, this organic manifestation of the voice out into a howl. But there's also the cut up method of formalism that Burroughs was using, and the incredibly intricate little machines that Geisen would devise. And of course, it was, I guess I'm getting to the point now where you have to bring up that Giorno was pretty sure that this gang of guys had been together in past lives of Buddhists and were going to be together again sometime. Okay, so you got to just realize that for him, it really was just this moment that we're all observing as this. For him, it was a continuum of creation.
Yes, Penny, that was beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. I totally, of course, agree with that. As a matter of fact, that at the densest point of my intimate relationship with John, he told me that he remembered me, and I can never say the word properly, but vista. How do you say it? Did someone say
Bodhisattva.
Oh, Bodhisattva, thank you.
You are a bodhisattva, Penny. It's true.
And, but the whole thing with John also was that John was all about lineage, to the extent, if I can go back to the dialogue poem, that he decided, like at one point when the thing was going to happen in France, and at the Museum of Modern Art, that he got me in touch with his technician so that he could put poems of mine in dialogue poem, to like redress the fact that, I wasn't in it. And I think that's that is a very specific kind of value that someone has. And, there's, what the thing that is so incredible to me, and that John always stressed, was he wanted to be with the minds of people. Like it was the mind of William, which that if you didn't have that relationship, we can never know. For me, it was the mind of John Giorno, and the fact that I had that relationship where I had access to him, where he was always honest, he was always brutally honest. And that was one of the things that I wondered about when I read Great Demon Kings, because, and I wanted to ask this question, because when I read it, I was like, wow, was this book written by lawyers? Because there was so much in there that John had, always spewed, that wasn't in the book. I'm sure that, and this of course is a question for Colin, but I'm sure that, you did make the statement that it was shaped into a more traditional memoir. I'm thinking specifically about, I kept asking Phong when we did the reading for the book publication, and I was asked, what did I want to read? And I said, I want to read the part about Robert Mapplethorpe's death, which was like extreme, and it's not in the book, right? I didn't know that till I got the book. So,
I don't even know what you're referring to, because I don't think I ever saw anything about the death in that memoir.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe he never put it in the memoir, because
I don't think he did.
It was in that fold up thing that he did for AIDS Treatment Network, the one that had the 2 poems. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
When you opened it up, it was like the revelation of Robert Mapplethorpe's last hours, like in brutal detail.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That wasn't in the memoir.
Yeah, that's amazing to me. Yeah, maybe with time he decided to be, I don't know, more careful.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, in terms of what we cut, I cut probably 300 pages about his family in Italy, you know, I cut sort of big sections.
Just
but
what I wanted to
I
read
know.
about.
Penny, I'm gonna get you.
what I
I'm gonna get you those pages.
Thank you.
But we didn't, you know, we would cut. I'm sure everyone who's read the book remembers the sex scene in the subway
Oh, yeah.
with, you know, that was originally about 30 pages long. So
Right.
there's only, you know,
Right.
but we
Right.
really did it. I mean, of course, the book was legally vetted, but it actually was not a particularly rigorous process, and it didn't lead to cutting much out because John had everything contemporaneously documented. So it wasn't, you know, I think we made some judgment calls about a few things, but it really wasn't censored in that way.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad. Yes, Ugo's sign is Hell Yes, Bob. Hell Yes.
Yeah, hell yes.
Hell Yes, yes. And I remember going up to visit. Yeah, I visited John, and then I visited also
So-
Linda Anglers in the same.
Imagine, Phong, though, imagine John and Ugo waking up in the morning,
Yeah.
opening the window, and there across the street
Yeah.
is Ugo's rainbow for them. Ah, good
Yeah.
morning, John. Oh, good morning. Buongiorno. You know?
Well done, touche.
Yeah, no, okay, cool. So we have two more questions before we would love, I mean, I would love for you to read a poem or two. I want to bring up his relationship, spirituality, his relationship with Tibetan Buddhism. When did that happen? How did it happen? And how he managed to sustain it and able to transform that kind of energy into his poetic work and as a visual artist too. So I like to maybe begin with you, Penny, if you don't
Well,
mind.
you know, I mean, the thing with John, with his practice was that he was always completely open about it, but he was not a proselytizer. He was never trying to get anybody else to meditate, never tried to get me to meditate. He would tell me.
That would be an impossible task, Penny.
Well, not really. I have my own forms of meditation, but
Okay.
you know, he would tell me when he was having these big events when all the Rinpoches or whatever they're called would come and gather. But he wouldn't like put me on the spot that I had to go and sit there for 12 hours or something. I think what's interesting to me as a person and as a person who lives an artistic life was that John found the things that he needed. He found the systems that he needed. And Buddhism was one of the systems that he needed. And to the degree that he could make it available to other people, he did that. And then when there was a huge falling out between different factions, he stepped away from it. And I mean, you know, clarity of mind. I mean, I think, you know, I think a lot and have thought a lot as I get older myself. John was 14 years older than me. I think a lot about the fact that John prepared for over 3 decades for the moment of his death. His particular meditation was for that moment of your death when you go out the crown of your head instead of going out your asshole. You know, I mean, he made me aware of this, you know.
Yeah.
Like, gee, like, when am I gonna, okay, Penny, don't worry, you know, at the last minute, you can just keep going the head, out the head, out the head, you know. I think it was that he, but also the thing is that he wasn't like a goody-goody, you know. And I think that many of us don't understand that Buddhism is a system of teaching. It's not a religion. You know, it's not, it's a spiritual practice, but it's really a method, a life method. And he, you know, he was always, you know, somebody, Kenny Davis wrote The Bitchy Buddhist, which is funny. But, you know, he was always just who he was, you know, and he would always whatever privilege that he was accruing, you know, he would also critique those people. He might not, the people who had the power, he might not do it publicly, but when you talk to him, he wasn't like some people who try to pretend that they don't have any privilege in this world, you know. He would like be very ruthless about it. And yes, he was benefiting, you know, and he would not juggle that, but he would balance that as part of through his what he's learned through Buddhism, you know, to balance it, you know. I don't know. Anyways,
Chris, I mean, thank you, Penny. Chris, do you see that more evident in his painting? This haiku phrase, I mean, these are very much an Eastern process too. In other words, so on level is emotional or spiritual, and the other is very creative, as a creative process. Am I right about this, Chris?
Well, I see two big connections. The first is that in Buddhist meditation, usually the way in different traditions is through following the breath. So you become extremely conscious of breath, and you get used to the rising and falling and the different rhythms that we all have in our minds and in our bodies. So that acute consciousness of breathing. And then he's doing a lot of mantric meditation where you get something going and you raise a certain kind of energy. So his amazing performative ability, I think, is very directed, very much influenced by all the things he understood from Buddhist breath control and stuff. The other thing is that I didn't really get the paintings at first, and then when I started hanging out a few times in his studio, it's like such an obvious connection to Tibetan Thangka painting, where the process is not improvisatory. You're not thinking maybe I'll change the blue or bring in this. You are carefully, mindfully painting something in. And so for him, it was this quiet, meditative work. And so being in that space and seeing the paintings in progress, it's just like, I went, oh, I get it. So it's this careful attention. And those paintings have this lovely level of detail. And I think that for him was a kind of quieting, meditative thing for him. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, we have Christian back here. Have you heard what we've been talking a little bit here, Christian? And can you add more to what been talked just now? Yeah, he's coming. All right. We can wait. Be patient here. Okay, maybe we'll get Kyle to follow and you come back. Okay. Kyle, why don't you take it on a little bit here?
I think I tune into both of those things, breath and mantra. And I think, you know, language and meditation are not really intuitive, natural bedfellows. You know, when I'm meditating, I feel like turning off the language machine is pretty necessary. But in John's poems, I feel like he's able to access through language. It's like a sub language. It's like what's underneath all of the accumulated conventional meaning and legibility that we live with in our ordinary experience of language. And I do think the paintings are related to that. I kind of I almost feel like I was thinking this when I saw the Speroni Westwater show that was just up. Which was mostly, there was a big wall of like the black and white text paintings. Right. And I don't think I had really realized it until seeing all of these paintings together, that there's something kind of, they're like Rothko portals in language, you know? Like obviously we can't totally turn off what these pieces are at like a semiotic level, but there's something there's something dimensional about the work, and I think that happens in the course of the poems too. We kind of sink deeper into subtext, kind of spiritual, especially Buddhist meditative subtext.
I think you're right. You're both right. Are you back? Can you join in, Christian?
I am back and better than ever. Thank you so much. Yeah, no, I actually just forgot to plug in my phone earlier, so
Yeah,
we just switched laptops and we're all good now.
that's okay. The imperfection of technology. We welcome it all.
Yeah. And so I did miss a big chunk of things, and I kept on running in and out.
Well,
So-
we were talking about the context of his attraction to Tibetan Buddhism, his own take of how he meditate and how that translates into his painting.
Yeah, well, and that's actually the topic I did want to get into, and I'm glad you mentioned. Obviously, it seems to me the most obvious run-on sentence between his paintings and his paintings placed in the art world is of course semiotics, and I think the Buddhism kind of. I mean, of all the people who use, there's been dozens of shows, for many years about just the role of text in art. Yeah. And John's text was particularly brutal, like aesthetically, like particularly and purposefully, like it had a brutalist quality to it. And, to me, that was just, as somebody who kind of like floated, from the poetry world into the art world, the kind of, the way that poets enable visual artists is both, I personally, I think that's just a very fascinating subject. That's the core of a couple of things that I'm working on. But yeah, he wanted to beat, he wanted to beat visual art with a bat, and that's kind of the way I look at his paintings. And he wanted to take a poem and just beat a painting with it.
Okay,
That's great.
Well, okay, so that's bring to the last question before we begin reading the poems. Everyone is a subject of Ugo Rondinone. I mean, that's huge. So the new life began with Ugo. I make a work on the book here, the memoir. It's March 11, 1989. So that's how they met. And it began a new chapter for John, period. I mean, this is the testament of love between those two people is so remarkable. And I got to know John, that same year, maybe in the fall, but really didn't really understand that intense love and relationship. But those of you who know, from that point on, can you share the role of Ugo in John's life and vice versa, Bob?
Well, I guess I got to jump on the question, didn't I, by talking about waking up in the morning and the two of them in bed with a lot of pillows, sitting over there drinking some tea and looking at, hell yes, we own New York. Hell yes, we sit in our bed and look across the street at our art on that side of that museum there. What's better? What better New York story than that one? Yeah. But when you say that Buddhism as an influence in John's life, etc., and Ugo, John brought Ugo to Buddhism, which he continues to study. Mm-hmm. I want to take you back to it's not that, it's that Buddhism was, in a way, John's life, just like poetry was, Phong. It was, anybody who went into St. Mark's Church for the extraordinary memorial, mm-hmm. you were walking into a Buddhist temple. Ugo did that. Yeah. Ugo turned that room into that church into a Buddhist shrine. Mm-hmm. Penny's right. It's not a religion, Buddhism. It's a way of being, a way of thinking. And I would just say that about John's Buddhism. Like everything else about John, it was different from everybody else's. you know, most of the poets, you know, flocked around Trungpa, and Naropa started with Trungpa and Allen and Waldman. But I don't know the lineage of John's, except I know it was called Crazy Wisdom. And it was a different Tibetan path that he was on. And I don't know other artists, I'm sure there are, who were part of it, but it wasn't the same kind of a scene that W.S. Merwin was involved with it, and you know, etc. That the Trungpa's scene. So that's all. I mean, that and the fact of you know, I guess one more time show that Ugo invented the portable lube of John's. Other than that, you know, their love for each other was, you know, just an inspiration to everybody, right?
It's amazing. It's amazing. They got married when John was just turned 80. And then Ugo had just turned 56. So that's what, 34 years different. Wow. It's remarkable. Kyle, one sentence before we read. Can you just give a summary of their love?
I think one sentence is hard, Phong.
2, 3.
I'll be really brief. I think that when people are in love, you can see it in their work because they see the world differently.
Yeah.
I think you see in their work this different orientation that exists inside of committed devotion.
Amazing.
And I just want to say, you know, to be around them, there were two very brilliant artists, and they loved each other. And there was this thing of you felt their closeness, but also that they gave each other the space,
A lot of space.
that they understood what that was to be an artist and need this time. And so for me and Tamara, it was just this model of what a collaboration and love between two artists could be. I mean, that's really just such a blessing for both of them, and then for all of us to be around that love. That was.
I also think that Ugo was a kind of midwife for John at that period when they came together.
Yeah.
That there was something very profound there. There was a kind of a formality that Ugo brought to John that gave John this kind of a vision, and that there was a fueling back and forth, you know, that John gave Ugo a kind of gravitas. I mean, there was this definite, incredible flow, like the infinity sign between the two of them.
Super beautiful, Penny. Christian.
Yes.
1 or 2 sentences about their relationship, their love.
Well, it's funny because, you know, as somebody who, you know, started off in the poetry world and then ended up in the art world, the imbalance between the two of them in those two scenes is quite profound. And because, I mean, there are very few people, and I think Mr. Holman is one of them, who know each of those worlds, you know, very well. Phong, of course, would be another one. And yes, Penny, absolutely, John gave Ugo gravitas. But that was in a poetic sense, because Ugo is an incredibly successful artist.
Oh, I know that.
So many different ways. And in that sense, he was, you know, John was getting the gravitas from him. So I think that that even despite that, you know, what do they call it? May, autumn, you know, May, October, Rome, you know, whatever. Despite the age difference, you know, they came at each other as, you know, kind of equal powers, and they recognize each other's powers, and they recognize when to recede with that power and when to, you know, give it to the other person. And to me, that's the, you know, that kind of dance and that kind of like mnemonic, just knowing when to switch roles is kind of like, that's a very profound love. Absolutely.
Beautiful.
So
How's that?
That was great. Colin, you have the last words.
Oh, no. I would just say, I only got to see them together a couple of times, but I think what Penny said is right, is that there was this incredible flow between them. And if you read the memoir, that's exactly what he didn't have with Warhol or Rauschenberg or Jasper Johns. He didn't have that mutual respect and love. And I think the fact that he found it and found it so powerfully it's just a beautiful thing to know.
Thank you so much. Yep. The last sentence here in the memoir reads, great demon kings are people controlled by their big egos, but sometimes their ego inspire them to aspire to realize the empty true nature of mind, and they become Buddhas. So why don't now, thank you so much for everybody, Bob, Chris, Penny, Kyle, Colin, Christian. Let's just see we can continue with a few poems. Back to you, Kyle.
Great, thank you, Phong. So first up, we have Penny. Penny, would you like to
I'm ready.
read for us?
Sure. So the reason I chose this poem is because this is my 70th year, but I'm actually now just about to go into my 71st year. And so I chose Thanks for Nothing on my 70th birthday in 2006. I want to give my thanks to everyone for everything. And as a token of my appreciation, I want to offer back to you all my good and bad jewels, wish-fulfilling gems, satisfying everything you need and want. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thanks. May every drug I ever took come back and get you high. May every glass of vodka and wine I've drunk come back and make you feel really good, numbing your nerve endings, allowing the natural clarity of your mind to flow free. May all the suicides be songs of aspiration. Thanks that bad news is always true. May all the chocolate I have ever eaten come rushing back through your bloodstream and make you feel happy. Thank you. Thanks for allowing me to be a poet, a noble effort, doomed, but the only choice. I want to thank you for your kindness and praise. Thanks for celebrating me. Thanks for the resounding applause. I want to thank you for taking everything for yourself and giving nothing back. You were always only self-serving. Thanks for exploiting my big ego and making me a star for your own benefit. Thanks that you never paid me. Thanks for all the sleaze. Thanks for being mean and rude and smiling at my face. I am happy that you robbed me. I am happy that you lied. I am happy that you helped me. Thanks, grazie, merci, beaucoup. May you smoke a joint with William and spend intimate time with his mind, more profound than any book he ever wrote. I give enormous thanks to all my lovers, beautiful men with brilliant minds, great artists, Bob, Jasper, Ugo. May they come here now and make love to you. And may my many other lovers of totally great sex, countless lovers of boundless, fabulous sex, countless lovers of boundless, fabulous sex, countless lovers of boundless, fabulous sex in the golden age of promiscuity. May they all come here now and make love to you if you want. May each of them hold each of you in their arms, bawling to your heart's delight, bawling to your heart's delight, bawling to your heart's delight, bawling to your heart's delight. May all the people who are dead, Alan, Brian, Lita, Jack, and I do not miss any of you. I don't miss any of them. No nostalgia. It was wonderful. We loved each other, but I don't want any of them back. Now, if any of you are attracted to any of them, may they come back from the dead and do whatever is your pleasure. May they multiply and be the slaves of whoever wants them, fulfilling your every wish and desire. But you don't want them as masters, as they are demons. May Andy come back here and fall in love with you and make each of you a superstar. Everyone can have Andy, everyone can have Andy, everyone can have Andy, everyone can have Andy. Huge hugs to the friends who betrayed me. Every friend became an enemy sooner or later. I am delighted you are vacuum cleaners, sucking everything into your dirt bags. You are none other than a reflection of my mind. Thanks for the depression problem and feeling like suicide every day of my life. And now that I am 70, I am happily almost there. 20 billion years ago, in the primordial wisdom soup, beyond comprehension and indescribable, something without substance moved slightly and became something imperceptible, moved again and became something invisible, moved again and produced a particle and particles, moved again and became a quark, again and became quarks, moved again and again and became protons and neutrons, and the 12 dimensions of space, tiny fireballs of primordial energy, bits tossed back and forth in a game of catch between particles, transmitting electromagnetic light and going fast, 40 million times a second, where the pebble hits the water. That is where the trouble began. Something without substance became something with substance. Why did it happen? Because something substanceless had a feeling of missing out on something. Not getting it was not getting it, not getting it, not getting it, imperceptibly not having something when there was nothing to have, clinging to a notion of reality from the primordially endless potential to modern day reality, 20 billion years later, has produced me, gave birth to me and my stupid, grasping mind, made me and you and my grasping mind. May Rinpoche and all the great Tibetan teachers who loved me come back and love you more, hold you in their wisdom hearts, bathe you in all pervasive compassion, give you pith instructions, and may you, with the diligence of Olympic athletes, do meditation practice, and may you, with direct confidence, realize the true nature of mind. America, thanks for the neglect. I did it without you. Let us celebrate poetic justice. You and I never tried to do anything and never succeeded. I want to thank you for introducing me to the face of the naked mind. Thanks for nothing.
Penny, thank you so much. That was wonderful. Next up, we've got Kyle. If you want to unmute yourself.
Thanks for everything, Penny. I wanted to read a poem that I didn't know before because I hear John so clearly in the poems that I do know, and I feel like none of us are going to imitate him. So it's a mistake to think you're special. You sit there thinking about the things you said over and over again, and I just want to sit here and think because it's powerful. I love being where people like being with each other, and then I want to take the night off, something soft and protective. I want to stay asleep for as long as I can. I want to stay asleep for as long as I can. I want to stay asleep for as long as I can. You have to be ruthless and accepting with nightmares. They convinced me I was wrong, and I believed them. They convinced me I was wrong, and I believed them, and you will never be able to forgive them. Unbuilding a building stone by stone, unbuilding a building stone by stone, unbuilding a building stone by stone, going backwards. Everyone I know is just like me. They're stupid. Tell me what I should do, but please tell it to me while I'm sleeping so I'll remember. The walls inside my house are made of human skulls fitted together like bricks, and the floor I'm standing on is soaked with blood and bile. Okay, where are the warrior priests? We need retribution. Warrior priests, we need retribution, offering death for a reason to make something happen, straight or with alcohol, drugs, and sexual energy. There is leverage in wealth. Feeding the whole, 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 spit in it, spit here. Butterflies sucking on the carcass of a dead bird, and your body is being pulled down backwards into the world below as a king. I feel most at home among the defiled. I feel most at home among the defiled. I feel most at home among the defiled, in the center of a flower under a deep blue sky. It's a mistake to think you're special.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Kyle. Chris, you're up next. Over to you.
Who?
You.
Ah. I'm going to read Just Say No to Family Values from 1994. Just say no to family values. On a day when you're walking down the street and you see a hearse with a coffin, followed by a flower car and limos, you know the day is auspicious. Your plans are going to be successful. But on a day when you see a bride and groom and wedding party, watch out. Be careful. It might be a bad sign. Just say no to family values and don't quit your day job. Drugs are sacred substances, and some drugs are very sacred substances. Please praise them for somewhat liberating the mind. Tobacco is a sacred substance to some, and even though you've stopped smoking, show a little respect. Alcohol is totally great. Let us celebrate the glorious qualities of booze, and I had a good time being with you. Just do it. Just do it. Just don't not do it. Do it. Christian fundamentalists and fundamentalists in general are viruses, and they're killing us, multiplying and mutating, and they're destroying us. Now, you know you've got to give strong medicine to combat a virus. Who's buying? Good acid. I'm flying, slipping and sliding, slurping and slamming. I'm sinking, dipping and dripping and squirting inside you. Never fast forward a cum shot. Milk, milk, lemonade round the corner where the chocolate's made. I love to see your face when you're suffering. Do it with anybody you want, whatever you want, for as long as you want, any time, any place when it's possible, and try to be safe in a situation where you must abandon yourself completely beyond all concepts. Just say no to family values. We don't have to say no to family values because we never think about them. Just do it. Just make love and compassion.
Thank you, Chris. Wonderful. Appreciate it. Over to Christian. Christian, should unmute yourself.
So, sorry, because of my little hiccup there. I'm going to, if I have time, I was going to do two. But the first one is Demon in the Details. And this one is for William Burroughs, Allen Ginsberg, Brian Geisen, and some others. Once upon a time, these friends loved each other very much, and they made a vow to stay together until they all attained enlightenment. And lifetime after lifetime, and endless rebirths and doing practice, they all realized the absolute empty true nature of mind. They were so happy and overjoyed. They started dancing and dancing and dance and dance. They were so happy in the shocked recognition of emptiness and compassion that they kept on dancing, dancing and dancing. And they danced away all their flesh and skin until there was nothing left but their bones. And they kept dancing in their bones, dancing skeletons, smooth skulls and speeding fingers, smiling teeth and wide-eyed holes. Sliding thymus and cracking shins, spinning and sparking spinal cord, shouting ribs and singing jaws, squirming pelvises, shivering bones and shaking bones. I want to jump into your heart. I'm gonna come in your heart from here. When it gets too hot for comfort and you can't get ice cream cones, tain't no sin. To take off your skin and dance around in your bones, tain't no sin. To take off your skin and dance around in your bones, you generated enough compassion to fill the world. And now all of you, resting in great equanimity, have accomplished great clarity and great bliss and the vast emptying space of primordially pure wisdom mind. But our friends were not totally, not completely enlightened beings. And sometimes 100,000 years in one of the fabulous God worlds or highest heaven is 1 year here or a couple of years here in ours. So much for that. Now, at this very moment, their consciousness are terrorized. The bells of hell, the bells of hell, the bells of hell. They have cut off your head and are shitting down your throat. The worst is at this moment happening, the very worst. It's happening now. Life goes on. One of the, this next one, if I have time, do I have time? Are we good? Okay, so, okay. This one is from 2001, and I think it's formally just, it's just one of his best poems, but I just love the idea of somebody who is so like, you know, lived his life against banality, attempting to write a poem about a tree. So this one is called, There Was a Bad Tree. You know, there was a bad tree that people hated. The leaves gave off a foul smell and the flowers had a bitter stink. If you got too close, you vomited. The fruit was poison. One bite and you were dead. Everyone really disliked it. The bad tree stunk. They talked endlessly about it and decided to cut it down, get rid of it. They chopped with axes and barely made a dent. Wearing breathing masks, they whacked at it and whacked at it and ribbed and chipped. Only powder from the shiny dark green leaves got on their skin, blistered and was really itchy, and they scratched, bloody, red. They put on protective gear with oxygen and went at it with electric buzzsaws and heavy equipment working 24-hour shifts. Finally, they cut it down. Everyone was very happy and celebrated the great victory. A notable cheer, well done. And they went to bed exhausted. The next morning, the bad tree had grown back and sprouting up new and bigger and more beautiful and ugly. It was very discouraging. They talked a lot about it and put it down again and poured gasoline on the roots and burned all the leaves and branches in a big fire. After the smoldering embers got cold, the tree grew back, bigger, more bad, and really gorgeous. Other people had been watching from their houses, waiting their turn. They thought themselves smarter, with higher intellectual capabilities. They knew how to get rid of that tree. It was a growing plant, a wood tree that grew in the earth. They incinerated it, burned the roots with chemicals, vaporizing acids and robotic lasers, detonated on the ground, bombed from the air, hit with smart missiles, and bombarded with radiation. They made a firestorm and covered the ground with concrete and steel. The tree grew back, more fresh, more elegant, even gracious, and really ugly. The wood was harder, darker, more shiny, thick, hot muscle, and the leaves, full and lush, moved like underwater plants luxuriously in the breeze. Everyone was very depressed, extremely discouraged. It was a catastrophe they had made for themselves, a hell world. They talked incessantly about it and came to a big decision. The mayor resigned in disgrace, and those who had worked so hard left, humiliated, departed, moved to the other side of town, stayed away. Then out of the blue appeared these beautiful people. They were simple and humble and a little like peacocks and seemingly well-intentioned with a great sense of humor, radiantly relaxed, oozing, loving, kindness and compassion. They walked right up and started eating the leaves. They ate the leaves and enjoyed them, became happy and laughed and chomped on more leaves. You could tell they really liked the taste. They pressed their cheeks to the flowers, black velvet coated with transmission oil. They licked the sweetest juices that seeped from the petals. The pollen was coal dust and petroleum gas. Burying their noses, they sucked in deep breaths, eating the smell, great bliss. They discovered the fruit hidden beneath the leaves. Overripe mangoes with stinky eggplant skin hung like testicles, and inside the fruit was rotting meat like liver. The special people got their faces into the stinking slime and really got into it. Inhaling with their lips and teeth and tongues, they licked and drank the thick red juice. The seeds, like calicoon rubies, seemed particularly potent and were chewed with great delight. The fruit contained the 5 wisdoms. The men and women became luxurious. Their skin was golden and their bodies almost transparent. They were clothed in shimmering rainbow lights. They became sleepy, yawned, and curled up under the tree and took a nap while they slept. Music filled the air, lounging against the gnarled tree trunk and protruding roots. Their huge bodies, colored red, yellow, blue, green, white, rested in great equanimity and radiated huge compassion. Inside the tree were secret homes of many demigods, hungry ghosts, and earth spirits who were very pleased with all the positive attention being paid them. After years of abuse, mutilation, and destruction, they were thrilled, even though they were being ravaged and their flowers wrecked. At the root endings, they were jewels, diamonds, and emeralds, and rubies, which were stars in the sky of the world below. The beautiful men and women woke up and nibbled on the leaves again. They ate the leaves like deer, pausing between bites, looking up at the vast empty sky. The leaves and fruit increased their clarity and bliss and introduced the nature of primordially pure wisdom, mind. Thank you.
Christian, thank you. Thank you for that reading. Thank you for introducing me to that poem. And I pass the reins over to you, Bob.
Great. Well, it's great to hear Christian. It takes me back to those the early days in the early 90s at the New Eureka Poets Cafe, where Christian was on that mic. And of course, that poem, which is a Buddhist parable, was the last one that John memorized. And I think, you know why? I mean, like after that, he said, oh, okay, because he memorized everything and it was incredible, including this, which is prose, The Death of William Burroughs. William died on August 2nd, 1997, Saturday at 6:01 in the afternoon from complications from a massive heart attack he'd had the day before. He was 83 years old. I was with William Burroughs when he died, and it was one of the best times I've ever had. Doing Tibetan Nyingma Buddhist meditation practices, I absorbed William's consciousness into my heart. It seemed as a bright white light, blinding but muted, empty. I was the vehicle, his consciousness passing through me. A gentle shooting star came in my heart and up the central channel and out the top of my head to a pure field of great clarity and bliss. It was very powerful. William Burroughs, resting in great equanimity and the vast empty expanse of primordial wisdom mind. I was staying in William's house, doing my meditation practices for him, trying to maintain good conditions and dissolve any obstacles that might be arising for him at that very moment in the bardo. I was confident that William had a high degree of realization, but he was not a completely enlightened being. Lazy, alcoholic, junkie William, I did not allow doubt to arise in my mind, not even for an instant, because it would allow doubt to arise in William's mind. Now I had to do it for him. What went into William Burroughs' coffin with his dead body? About 10 in the morning on Tuesday, August 6, 1997, James Grauerholtz and Iris Silverberg came to William's house to pick out the clothes for the funeral director to put on William's corpse. His clothes were in a closet in my room, and we picked the things to go into William's coffin and grave, accompanying him on his journey in the underworld. His most favorite gun, a .38 Special snub nose, fully loaded with 5 shots. He called it the Snubby. The gun was my idea. This is very important, William always said. You can never be too well armed for any situation. Of his more than 80 world-class guns, it was his favorite. He often wore it on his belt during the day and slept with it fully loaded on his right side under the bedsheet every night for 15 years. Gray fedora. He always wore a hat when he went out. We wanted his consciousness to feel perfectly at ease, dead. His favorite cane, a sword cane made of hickory with a light rosewood finish, sport jacket, black with a dark green tint. We rummaged through the closet and it was one of the best of his shabby clothes and smelling sweet of him. Blue jeans, the least worn ones, were the only ones clean. Red bandana, he always kept one in his back pocket. Jockey underwear and socks. Black shoes, the ones he wore when he performed. I thought the old brown ones that he wore all the time because they were comfortable. James Grauerholtz insisted, there's an old CIA slang that says getting a new assignment is getting new shoes. White shirt, we'd bought it in a men's shop in Beverly Hills in 1981 on the Red Night tour. It was his best shirt. All the others were a bit ragged. And even though it had become tight, he'd lost a lot of weight and we thought it would fit. James said, don't they slit it down the back anyway? Necktie, blue, hand painted by William. Moroccan vest, green velvet with gold brocade trim, given him by Brian Geisen 25 years before. In his lapel pin, the rosette of the French government's Commandeur des Arts et Lettres and the rosette of the American Academy of Arts and Letters, honors which William very much appreciated. A gold coin in his pants pocket, a gold 19th century Indian head $5 piece symbolizing all wealth. William would have enough money to buy his way into the underworld. His eyeglasses in his outside breast pocket, a ballpoint pen, the kind he always used. He was a writer and sometimes wrote longhand. A joint of really good grass. Heroin. Before the funeral service, Grant Hall slipped a small white paper packet into William's pocket. Nobody's gonna bust him, said Grant. William, bejeweled with all his adornments, was traveling in the underworld. I kissed him. An early LP album of us together, 1975, was called Biting Off the Tongue of a Corpse. I kissed him on the lips, but I didn't do it. And I should have. 1997, John Giorno. Do you want to hear the Welcoming the Flowers, his poem about being buried, or is it?
Absolutely.
All right, absolutely, here it comes. Welcoming the Flowers. I'm standing on the corner of Stanton and Christie waiting for the traffic light to change. A man is sitting on the steps of a building holding his young son on his lap. He's eating fried chicken from Chico's Takeout on Houston. He chews on the wings and feeds a bit of the breast to his son. The man finishes eating, puts the leftover chicken and bones, French fries and soda can in a paper bag and leaves it on the sidewalk. A brown dog from a neighboring building snoops around, gets his nose in the bag, chews on the bones, and makes a mess. The man hits the dog with a newspaper and it yelps and runs away. A black cat sitting in a window watches wide-eyed, staring down at the dog, chicken bones and gristle. I see their past and present lives. The man eats the chicken, and the chicken was his mother, who had died of cancer 2 years ago. The dog chewing on the bones was his father, who had died of a heart attack 5 years ago. And the cat in the window was his grandmother, and his young son, whom he holds so tenderly, was the man who killed him in his previous life. His wife comes home with groceries and takes the boy into the building. She'd been his lover in many past lives and was his mother for the first time in this one. The world just makes me laugh. Fill what is empty, empty what is full, light as body, light as breath. Welcoming the flowers, daffodils baptized in butter, lilacs lasciviously licking the air, necklaces of wisteria bowing to magnolia mamas. The cherry blossoms are razor blades. The snow dahlias are sharp as cat piss. The lilies of the valley are lilies of fur, lilies of feather, lilies of fin, lilies of skin, the almost Miss America rose. The orchids are fat licking tongues and they all smell so good. And I'm sucked into their meaty, earthy goodness. You make my heart feel warm. I lay my head on your chest and feel free, filling what is empty, emptying what is full. Filling what is empty, emptying what is full, filling what is empty, emptying what is full, filling what is empty, emptying what is full. The gods we know we are, the gods we knew we were. I smell you with my eyes, see you with my ears, feel you with my mouth, taste you with my nose, hear you with my tongue. I want you to sit in my heart and smile. Words come from sound, sound comes from wisdom, wisdom comes from emptiness, deep relaxation of great perfection. Welcoming the flowers, armfuls of honeysuckle and columbine, red-tipped knives of Indian paintbrush. The fields of daisies are the people who betrayed me, and the lupine were self-serving and unkind. The voluminous and voluptuous bougainvillea are licking fire, loving what it cannot burn. The big bunch of 1,000 red roses are all the people I made love to. Hit my nose with the stem of a rose. The poppies have pockets packed with narcotic treats. The chrysanthemums are a garland of skulls. I go to death willingly with the same comfort and bliss as when I lay my head on my lover's chest, welcoming the flowers. The third bouquet is a crown of bluebells, a carillon of foxglove. A sunflower snuggles its head on my lap and gazes up at the sky. May all the tiny black insects crawling on the peony petals be my sons and daughters in future lives. Great balls of light radiating white, red, blue, concentric, dazzle, yellow, green, great exaltation. The world just makes me laugh. May sound and light not rise up and appear as enemies. May I know all sound as my own sound. May I know all light as my own light. May I spontaneously know all phenomena as myself. May I realize original nature, not fabricated by mind. Empty, naked awareness.
Bob, thank you. Thank you so much. So now we'll transition over into a brief Q&A section. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and I can call on you. We'll start off, I'll be reading a question on behalf of one of my colleagues, Nick Bennett. He says, I recommend everyone read this memoir. It's so incredibly beautiful and inspiring. With John's Buddhist belief system, he must have lived in a supremely good life before this one to have such amazing experiences with so many incredible people. I think John really typified a person that led his life with love through sex and intimacy. In his memoir and life, the chapters are divided by his lovers. Each phase of his life is guided by his love for others and reciprocal exchange of love and sex. I'm curious if anyone has a comment on that, but a question for Colin. There's a part in the memoir where I believe an assistant of John's was in a bar or somewhere and had an encounter with Robert Rauschenberg and mentioned that he was working on John's memoir. Rauschenberg shouted that if John publishes anything about him and their relationship, he'd sue him. Had the publisher heard anything from the Rauschenberg Foundation?
Not that I'm aware of, no. Since he is dead, and also since Rauschenberg is dead and he's a public figure, I thought we could get away with it.
Well, thank you, Colin. Does anyone have any comments on the first part of the question?
What was it?
Yeah, about how, sorry, typified a person who lived his life with love through sex and intimacy in his memoir and his life. The chapters are divided by the lovers, each phase guided by his love for others.
Well,
and
I think
reciprocal
it's very
exchange.
clear that John
Curious
was
if anyone
loved.
has a comment.
Did you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
You muted.
Okay.
Say it again, Penny.
I was muted?
No.
No.
We didn't hear you. Say it again, though.
Okay, hold on. I said, I think everyone will agree that John was a lover. You know, when you were with him, you felt you were the most important person in the world to him. He had that way of just encompassing you, you know, in his consciousness. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna stop there.
Okay. Well, with no further questions, we have a slideshow prepared that we'd like to move over to Phong. Are you ready?
Yes. Why don't we
Okay.
share with everyone the beautiful images of John in various contexts, environment, and so on.
All right.
Go ahead, Carl. This is a drawing I made of John for the I Love John Giorno from
Amazing.
Yes, and I think I make two of them, but this is one of them. Go ahead, Kyle. Moving forward, this is John super early on. Might have been, is there a caption of the date there, Kyle?
I don't have it on hand. No, I'm sorry.
Okay, so,
But this was Burroughs who took this, right?
yes, right there in front of it. Okay, good. 1965. Yes, that's amazing. And this is a beautiful picture of John in 3/4 book file. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
This is when, yes, and that is appear in the winter 1963 and 4 Film Culture magazine, published by the great Jonas makers.
Jonas.
Jonas, go ahead forward, Kyle. This shows you the performative aspect of John. Beautiful photograph. Here's another one. This is at the Poetry Project. The downstairs, beautiful, early on. Go ahead. This is Dio poem. Look at his hair. Amazing.
Afro.
What?
Yeah.
It's so incredibly great looking. Yikes. Amazing.
Such a hippie.
Yeah, and not the opposite of John, though. Wow, can you just see the contrast there, Bob? Wow, amazing. Peaceful, serene, beautiful Buddhist John.
This photo is the cover of his book, Cancer in My Left Ball.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right, Bob. Go ahead, Carl. It's amazing.
There's a sentence you don't hear every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, Christian. Look at that. Look at the jump.
There's Ann Waldman.
Here's
Yeah.
Dan on the right.
Yeah.
I don't know who's on the left,
I
but
don't know the left.
the Richard Gere, or I don't know. Go ahead, Kyle. Next one. Here, the two. Yep,
It's not snubby, but it is a gun.
Yeah.
I know. Determinedly so.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah,
Right. Yep.
the album.
Yep.
Glory.
I want to share my money with.
Yeah. So great.
Very strong. Go ahead, Kyle. And here's Penny.
Penny.
Glamorous with the man cut. What? Smoking cigarette beautifully. So with the gesture and whatnot. The
In
two
love with
Italian-
John.
Yes. Beautiful. All right, Kyle. And here for picture of John and Ugo together.
Wow, beautiful.
How beautiful.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And lastly, it's this beautiful video. Oh, yes. This is the cover of our Ugo Rondinone. I love John Giorno. I think we printed 15,000 of them.
Wow.
And it's gone. And here are some images of the immersive show I mentioned early on.
Yeah.
I love John Giorno. Here's the kitchen. Here is a switch into, and then here is at white columns.
Right.
And the next one is, I believe, right outside at white column.
Wow.
Here's the new museum. Upstairs, you can see here.
Yep.
Beautiful. And here's is installation shot at Red Bull. And then I believe we have a few of, yes, beautiful. This is at the Hunter College, downtown Canal Street.
Yeah.
On Hudson Street. And here back to Hunter on the upstairs level of the gallery. And then finally here at Skydart. Immersive. And I believe
Yes, Brony.
Oh, wow.
Here is
Recent shot.
Spaloni Westwater. I would encourage everyone to come and see this beautiful show.
There's a week left.
It's 1 week left. Thank you, Kyle. So I would urge that you would come and see it this Saturday if it's possible. And we have a few more shots from that show, Kyle. My favorite painting. Sit in my heart and smile. Love it. Here a few more. Never seen Live a Killer in black, but here it is, John sitting in the famous windows across from the new museum. Yes, I think this may be the last photo. And then finally, John in Venice as our collateral project. Go ahead, Kyle.
I have a funny connection to this, is that I'm a poet and I'm a performer. And often when you're performing, you're just saying these dumb words in my poem, and somehow it's like a mirror of people's minds. And you realize people are seeing things they already know, and they think it's my words. It's not my words. My words are a mirror. And it's just reflecting the wisdom that is already in their mind. I'm going to begin with a poem that's called Everyone Gets Lighter. Life is lots of presents, and every single day you get a big bunch of gifts under a sparkling pine tree hung with countless balls of colored lights, piles of presents wrapped in fancy paper. The red one with the green ribbon, and the green one with the red ribbon, and the blue one with silver, and the white one with gold. It's not what happens, it's how you handle it. You are in a water bubble human body on a private jet in seemingly a God world, a glass of champagne, a certain luminosity and clarity, skin of air, a flat sea of white clouds below, a vast dome of blue sky above, and your mind is an iron nail in between. It's not what happens, it's how you handle it. Dead cat bounce, catch a falling knife. After endless shadow boxing in your sleep, fighting in your dreams and knocking yourself out, you realize everything is empty and appears as miraculous display. All are in nature, the play of emptiness and clarity. Everyone gets lighter, everyone gets lighter, everyone gets lighter, everyone is light. That's it.
All right. Well, that was wonderful. That was wonderful. And Phong, I believe that you'd like to take us out with a poem. At the Rail, we conclude all of our events with poems. And so, Phong, if you'd like to take it over.
Yes, I love to be able to read this short poem that his friend Fanny Howe, our friend, wrote for our special edition. It's called Wide Step Up for John Giorno. Shifting scale of persons to surroundings, the white rocks shrink and go gravely in the night. This earth cannot live without holy rites, lots of hills to climb up and down, a straight ravine between the friars. Turn to the right and you will fall to the left. One pilgrim wears a beard down to his chest, but love hates coverings and prefers to be seen, and if despised, to melt away quickly. No close is allowed to weaken the bliss of scripture. For John. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Kyle, Colin, and Christian.
Thank you all so much. Thank you,
Phong,
Phong.
do we know if that was his last, if John's last reading, the one in Venice? I think it might have been.
It was his last reading.
Yeah.
Super.
Yes, I want to echo that. Thank you, Phong. Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Kyle, Christian, Colin, Chris, Bob. Thank you to John Giorno for being everything that you were. This has been a really special event, I think. And thank you to everyone who tuned in today. And please do join us next Monday for a conversation between Dustin Yellen and Paul D. Miller, as always, at 1 p.m. right here in the Zoom. So I am going to ask to unmute you all so you can say goodbye as we head out. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. That was extraordinary.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for this festival.
Ciao tutti.